consideration that we would make a film together. And I think it's a pretty, it's fictional, of course, but we have been friends for such a long time. So a lot of it was drawn from our personal relationship and sort of what we're interested in storytelling and aesthetic, visual language, and sort of it's reflective of how we are with each other, but also how, many female friendships are and how human relationships are, really. So I think it was just sort of a beautiful product of a long time of admiring each other's work and wanting to bring that out into the world and shine a light on something like a genre perhaps that is not seen so much in modern cinema.
Yeah, well, it was interesting because Jaclyn and I have known each other for this amount of time, and I guess we do have different writing styles, but I think essentially we've both been telling quite feminine female stories. And
I think Greta is such an amazing poet, and I think that is very, apparent in the film. And I think the film is also very true to the script in terms of, I've made films, and I'm sure Greta's worked on films where it does vary. You set out to make a certain story, and then, it's never the same. But I think what's so beautiful about the writing is because Greta's such a talented writer, and I sort of, I don't know, I look at things more of like objectively, like as a filmmaker, how can we do this? What is the right structure or whatever? And I think that we really complemented each other in that way.
And if there's a sort of, not message is probably a bit strong, but if there was something you were trying to transmit about the way love and friendship can overlap, what would you say that was the core essence of the film?
Well, I think it's interesting because throughout our lives, we're always kind of mourning the people we once were. And I think I've realised this more so than ever because in the digital age, we're like reminded all the time of these pictures of ourselves like last year or 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of strange that, I don't know, having a distance from that sort of coming of age self, and then again sort of here we are again. But I think in life we're always mourning these selves because we're always evolving, and I think it was important to us to kind of make something. Of course we see a lot of coming of age films, but actually about two characters in real time still trying to figure it out, and I think that's just the human process.
And I don't think you do see a lot of films of teenage girls coming of age or teenage boys coming of age, which we have like an aspect of that in this, but we don't see a lot of films of women over 30 coming of age and what that means, because there's all this ageism and stuff. And I think that was important to us to have like a realistic sort of depiction and experience of where we are in our lives, and and I think sharing that and having sort of putting up a mirror to that with these characters of Joe and Scarlet, and that was a really interesting and, it's a complex
love comes across as a kind of time capsule, which I think is interesting.
I think there's a sort of subtle language with women and sort of like we kind of, we're always never saying what we want to say. And I think when you look back at your teenage self, when we were writing this, we were looking in our old diaries and love letters and all these things, and everything felt very real and urgent and now. And, we had big dreams and big hopes, and there was a set of sort of experimental freedom to those teen selves. And I guess it's sort of...
There's an innocence. And an innocence.
Yeah, that's a real
being
innocence.
that age. And, oftentimes I think about, oh my gosh, I wish I was still 15. I had really amazing dreams that, are still my dreams, but I didn't realize, how hard it is or whatever. And I think what's so, special about this film is we had such an amazing ensemble, and...
Amber, you're so amazing.
Yeah. It's like we didn't set out to hire all females or all have an all female cast. It just sort of happened naturally and organically. And I also worked on the film with two women who have been very influential in my life and my professional and also in Friends. Cece Kellogg was a producer, and Irene Gomez-Emilson, who was the DP. So I feel like you can feel, and also of course Greta and new friends that came about. And so I think you can feel that real sort of companionship and camaraderie and intimacy around the making.
I mean, this film was made for less than $100,000. So, this is everybody who was making this film. It was kind of, they were doing it to kind of for the art of the film, but also just to make it and to kind of.
And naturally, like, it is about women, and so I think that the people that did respond to the script were women, but also like there are also great men that worked on the film. You know what I mean?
Sure. What do you think young teenage boys would take from this film? Do you think they might get a deeper kind of understanding?
These characters. We wanted to keep it open-ended because life is so complex and messy, and you see bits of Jo where you think she's this free sort of out there character, but then as soon as she sees a school friend, she lets go of the hand of Scar, and she sort of it's complicated.
It keeps you guessing. It's ambiguous, and like even their relationship, like it's sort of, you feel the intimacy between them, but it is also sort of open to interpretation, and I think that's a beautiful thing.
It has the feeling of a stage.
I mean, I come from a theater background. I think we both come from a dance background in different ways. So
when we were writing this, I just finished making a film in Italy, which was all inspired by dance and movement theatre. So I was very interested in the visual language of movement and how you could have a language which says, visually everything you can't say on screen. So I think dance is something, and we both come from a dance background, and I think Sarah Winter, who came up with the dances, who was amazing, we had a handful of rehearsals with her before we started filming, and it gave me and Amber, I think, this physical intimacy that when we were sort of playing the flashback versions of our characters, it meant that we shared that history, and we were able to then sort of.
I think it's there.
That's for you to decide.
Yeah.
What do you think it represents?
You go into film to express an emotion that you can't say or do, and I think the beauty of this film, there's dialogue, of course, and there's traditional scenes or whatever, but you have these sort of moments that are sort of like transformative through their dance. And I was sort of remote in the whole rehearsal process of the dances, and I was speaking with Sarah and speaking with Greta and Amber throughout it, and Irene, the DP, was there. So watching them sort of bring that to life, and they brought such different energies, was really beautiful and special. And I think that it makes sense in the overall context of the film because it adds a different sort of narrative structure. Because on the page, it's like Jo and Scarlet dance, and whatever that is can be interpreted in so many different ways. And I think that having the sort of freedom that you three found is what kind of translated to screen.
And what are the kind of universal themes that transcend gender in the film?
Well, I think actually rewatching it is kind of interesting because I think we had a lot of conversations about this, that actually Jo, for instance, I think she's kind of fluid in her experiences of love, and she, of course she loves Scarlet and then John, and it's sort of, and then the female friendships themselves, it's kind of a homage to female friendship and love and first love. And
there's a sense that she's kind of a sensorialist, but then she's sort of given up on being a sensorialist for something more. It's
the fluidity of sexuality, and like it doesn't matter who you love or what gender they are, you love them. And I think that is something that, obviously it's an all female identifying cast and characters, but there is the sense of love that I think as humans is just a human emotion.
And I think there's curiosity too. I think as we get older, I think we're always curious about, what if, and we kind of mourn these selves, and we carry the ghosts of these people we once were. And there's always these scattered reminders from pictures or friends from the past or whatever. And I think we consciously, when we were writing the scenes with Scarlet and Jo, when they come together, it's just them for the first 20 minutes of the film, because it's kind of, maybe Jo is curious. She wants to know. There's a curiosity, and I think.
And what happened between them, is apparent, and I think the subtlety in the performances and the characters, but it's also not telling the audience exactly what happened. So I think that's also interesting because we chose to keep this sort of this film very subtle in that approach, and not sort of like, this is what happened, this is how you should feel.
It's that kind of subtlety kind of riposte to a lot of modern filmmaking, which can be very sort of fast-paced, heavily edited, very sort of, it doesn't really allow the space for sort of dreaming. It just tells you this is what's happening next.
I think both of us,
we really wanted to ground the first part of the film and the whole film, hopefully, in their experience, and so that you were sort of invested in them as people rather than sort of projecting some sort of view or idea that Greta and I, or all of us as the filmmakers, were trying to put down an audience's throat, because I feel like oftentimes for me, it's more impactful to kind of go in with an open mind and leave and ask questions and be like, oh, like, that's why you want to watch a film again, right? Because you don't always understand, it leaves you with questions. And so I think that was also our intention when we were writing it.
I think what we wanted to show was actually a lot of modern films, they don't stay in the room with the characters, they tend to leave. And I think a lot of our favourite filmmakers, like Cassavetes and all these kind of older sort of traditions of filmmaking, is they stay in the room with the characters and they just let them live. And then I think that's what we want as people. We want to be connected to people in dark rooms, to feel like we understand them. And it's about translating a sense of just the human consciousness. It's complicated.
What did you guys learn from each other and from the process of the film? What did you take away from it?
Well, I realised that Jaclyn's fearless. She's not scared of anything. She's brilliant. Jaclyn never lies.
I think very blunt and direct. But I think that there are so many elements of this film that are Greta, and that root from also Greta and I's relationship. And I think the poetry and the beauty and sort of feeding into each other's sort of aesthetic and sort of overall like goals, just as artists and filmmakers, whatever that is, we're both in I suppose what I realized about Greta in this process, not that I didn't know this, but that she is a true artist, and that we are both in this for the art and not for ulterior motives or whatever. And I think that really shows through in her work and the way that she goes about in her life. It's a very beautiful thing.
There's a bit of pressure now, because you said if you've got something interesting to say.
No, just anything, it's fine.
First of all, I really enjoyed the film. Well done, everybody involved. Maybe a bit of a basic question, but apart from obviously the trials of getting film funded and all of that, once you were kind of geared up, ready to go and on set, do you have a memory of something that was particularly challenging? And if so, like, how did you kind of overcome it?
The weather was bad, wasn't it?
On this film, comparatively to other films, it was very smooth. I'm being completely honest, and I think that was down to the amazing collaborators. Like Greta said, it's something funny like the weather. Like, that was our challenge, and I think that is absolutely unheard of. Of course, we wish we had more time, we wish we had more money, we wish everything was perfect, but I think that this movie is like a fever dream. It was like a period of my professional life that I wish I could repeat every time that I work. And I think that, I don't know that there were substantial challenges. I think there's always challenges and money and getting the film out there, but obviously we're so grateful that everyone is here tonight, and so that we hope that those of you who have seen the film and are here will spread the word and get people to see it, because it is a very small indie film, and so even to get us here tonight is difficult. And
it's always hard to, when you're trying to explain a film to get it financed, you're saying, well, what happens? And you say, well, kind of nothing. So people think, and then you think, well, and then you say, okay, well, it's a simple story, but with big ideas and big feelings. And then people go, So it's always and then you think, well, I'm making a very simple film, but small things are really big, and fantastical things with sword fight.
But it has, but also this film has an element of magic. It still has an element of magic too, and also the simplicity, because it is cinema, and there are things that don't necessarily happen in real life that are happening in our film.
Well, they're very. I went to see that film Furiosa the other day, the Mad Max movie, and then obviously the two different kinds of, but they're both about strong women in a way.
Yeah.
But it's a different kind of femininity. Yeah. So I think there's space for all of that in cinema, right? There's space for everything to exist. Deeper stories like that.
Somebody should give us $200 million and be able to do.
Okay, can we work on that as a team? Perhaps everybody, we can club together, get 200 million together. 1 million.
Yeah, every seat in here, 1 million.
Do we have another question at all? I think there's probably only there's a chap over here. The dance moment's quite profound in a way that I think is quite difficult
to articulate, in that it was sort of moments of polish and togetherness, and moments of sort of that some of it felt naive in its quality of movement, and sometimes it was choreographed, and sometimes it was just sort of two girls waving their arms. And I thought it seemed to reverberate really beautifully as a bass note for the rest of the action of what was happening. I just wondered, when you were working with Sarah Winter, I think you said her name was, what brief did you give her to come up with that?
We gave her a soundtrack. We said, because it's set in sort of the early 2000s, the flashback. So we said, Jaclyn kind of came up with this soundtrack of songs, and then
Yeah, I think Sarah, we were talking about music and sort of that being the like important part of kind of the movement that would form. And interestingly, I believe that only one song in the original sort of choreographed dances is still present in the final film. All the other music was replaced. So they were kind of like taking this gamble on what the final sort of dances would be. But I think that kind of finding also the different and very beautifully different energies between Amber and Greta in those moments really informed the sort of overall arc of both of their characters, because they do come together in these dances, and yet in the contemporary strand of the film they have been estranged in a way and sort of brought together. So that is sort of reminiscent of their youth, and whether that's in real time or whatever, it's up to the audience.
It's a kind of hauntological kind of lyricism.
Yes. Yeah.
In a sense.
So I think that the dance sort of element of the script was always there, and how it like formed and came to be was very much through Sarah and Amber and Greta and Irene. So I think I was kind of there to just like oversee it and like say yes or no or whatever and figure out where to put the camera. But I think that their work together in that month or two before we started shooting is like you said, profound, and it didn't matter their experience level as dancers.
I just can't see. No more. Okay, cool. All right. So, no more time for all those hands that are in the air. I'm sorry, everyone.